In this session, we're going to look at payroll processing. Before we start identifying trips that need to be processed under payroll, we want to go to the driver's form, the driver's button up here in the top right-hand corner. And you want to make sure that all of your drivers have pay rates set. So I'm going to start by clicking the first driver in the list, clicking on the payroll button. And you want to make sure that for all the payers that you do service with, that driver has that payer identified and the mileage rate and the leg rate and no load and wait time if it applies. For a STS payer, for example UCare STS, we want to put the mileage and trip rate in under the appropriate columns. And then you can work your way across for wheelchair as well as stretcher. So you want to go through each driver, click on payroll, and identify the flat rates for those drivers. Once that's complete, you can close this form and we can go up to payroll processing. In the lighter shaded blue box on the left hand side here are your filters, and you're going to use these filters to identify the trips that you want to pay your drivers on. Now, one of the most common ways to process payroll is for a company to pay the drivers on trips that has been paid by Blue Cross. So as an example, we're going to come in here and I'm going to say I want everything from March 1st, and then my pay period end date is July 14th, for example. If I hit apply, all that's going to do right now is just show me every trip in the system from March 1st to July 14th, because I have no other filters in place. There's a checkbox down here that says show only blank pay dates, and that's the filter that's only going to show you trips that you have not paid the drivers out on. If I take that filter away, I see a lot more trips on the list. There's 369 opposed to 205, and that's because the trips in the list have a payment date in them, stamped to them, which means that I've paid the drivers out on these trips. So I want to see only blank, so it filters out the trips that I've already paid on previously. And then I can check on show only claim paid, and this is only going to show claims that have been paid by the insurance company. And if you notice, it brings my list down a lot farther. So these 12 trips between March 1st and July 14th have a blank payment date and have been paid on by the insurance companies. From there, I'm going to select all these trips because I've identified which trips that I want to pay on, and I want to stamp in a payment date on these. So 7/31 is what I'm going to use, and set the payment date on these selected records. Now the screen clears out, and it makes sense because I have a filter over here that says show me only blank pay dates. So as soon as I stamped in 7/31, the list clears because of that filter. So I now want to remove that filter and then pull back up 7/31 to see those 12 trips again. I then want to select those 12 trips, and now we want to calculate the payroll. So I'm going to click on calculate payroll, and I have the option to apply deductions. If you don't indicate deductions for the drivers, just click no. If you do, click yes. And we have the insurance deduction, vehicle lease deduction, and a miscellaneous deduction. And you can specify all of them, one of them, then you put in your payment date one more time and click apply. And then we're done. And then the very last step is to just produce your reports. So I'm going to click right below calculate payroll as contractor pay date report. So I'm going to click on that, and the pay date that I'm looking for is 7/31. And I can specify a driver if I just want one report, or if I leave this blank I can get them all. And the most common report that's used is contractor by leg or contractor by leg with deductions. So if you apply deductions to the payroll, you want to use this contractor by leg with deductions. If you don't, you can use contractor by leg. And then there's a number of other options that allows you to export payroll to Excel for your accountant, some summaries, a summary to Excel. But for this training purpose, we're going to look at contractor by leg. Now what we're looking at, the first page is for driver Aaron Luger and the detail of all the trips that they did in that time frame. And it has the charges broken out by leg, as well as the total mileage and total contractor fee at the bottom. If we go to the next page, in-house driver, next page. So there's an invoice in here for each driver that's included within your current payroll. And then the very last page of this report is an overall summary of the payroll. So there was a total of 12 trips, 166 miles, and the total contractor fee was $214.60. Once your payroll has been completed and paid out, you also have the option to lock the payroll. And the advantage of locking the payroll has to do with the fact that no changes can be made to that payroll. So I have my 7/31 payroll still up on the screen. I'm going to select all those trips again, and I can click on lock payroll and click yes. And now these 12 trips are locked, which means the driver cost cannot be recalculated and the payment date cannot be removed or reassigned. And the only way to do that is to unlock a payroll if changes are needed. Another common practice in terms of applying different filters for payroll is some companies will pay the drivers out on every trip regardless of the status, the payment status of that trip. So they would more likely run a bi-monthly billing period. So give me everything from 7/1/2016 to 7/15/16, and they only want blank pay dates because that's still going to be the filter to indicate if a trip's been paid or not to a driver. They wouldn't flag this trip as paid because they're paying the driver for everything regardless of the status. But they would then indicate that I'm going to only pay drivers on things that have been sent to billing, which would filter out the scheduled statuses if they're still waiting on a trip sheet, canceled, things like that. And then hit apply. So at the start is to identify the trips that you want to pay on. Once you've made that identification, then you move forward by selecting them all, stamping a pay date, pulling that pay date back up, selecting them all one more time and calculating the payroll, and then finally producing the pay date reports. That will conclude this portion of the payroll processing training session.